Does Drake have a classic album? He recently said that his new album, For All the Dogs, will be another classic. So let's break down his 4 most iconic albums and talk about if any of them can be considered a classic. So let's jump straight into this. If you want to stay up to date with everything surrounding hip hop, make sure to subscribe and also become a part of this community by joining our Discord server in the description. Drake has accumulated quite some songs and quite some records over the course of his career, and recently we started the debate about whether Drake has a classic album. As I said, this was after he told us that For All the Dogs will be another classic, and I asked y'all in a poll on my YouTube community tab, which if you're not a part of the community yet, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on those polls. I asked y'all which of those 4 albums that we kind of broke down and that kind of crystallized themselves out of the conversation when we were talking about that album and the classic album. I asked y'all which one of those would be Drake's classic, and let's go through these albums each by each and talk about if they can be considered a classic. So let's start with Views. Views 2016 is the most recent out of the 4 albums that I asked y'all to vote on which one would be a classic, and Views is the one that we kind of got the idea from, or the feeling from, that Drake wanted to be his big album. He wanted this to be the conceptually most cohesive album, the one that has the most cohesive sound and sound design to it, with 40 obviously designing this Toronto snow sound, this imitating the cold of the Toronto winter style. I think it came out in April of 2016, so this was kind of coming off of the winter, and that was the vibe that we were getting. Definitely a lot of great songs on here. I think it's honestly a little too recent that this album came out that we can talk about this, but I just don't see a lot of people talking about Views in the conversation for this to be a classic, and that is the reason why it is by far the least voted on this list. That doesn't mean it's a bad album at all. I wouldn't consider it a classic though. When we look at the influence that this album has had, maybe there's a very unique Toronto bubble that maybe he was also influenced by or further influenced with this album. That can kind of see some impact from this, but overall this album didn't do the impact that maybe some other albums did. Now I think it's one of his most, as I said, cohesive, one of his most distinct albums with a sound that you can definitely kind of attach to that one record, and I always like that album and go back to it to experience that sound again. But it's just nothing that would be considered a classic, which is kind of sad because we know that he was working on this so hard. Even in 2015 on Back to Back, he quoted that he was working on the album and he was getting back to Views now after dealing with Meek. But yeah, it just never came out as a classic. Next up on the list, we had If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. And the funny thing is, in the last video that I dropped on this, where we talked about For All the Dogs, I asked y'all if y'all consider this a classic. And to my surprise, honestly, the majority of y'all said that y'all consider this a classic. I wasn't expecting that. I thought that y'all were saying like, oh, it's a cool tape, but not a classic by any means. But the majority of y'all said that y'all think this is a classic. The reason being that this was kind of his comeback in 2015 after we had 2011 with Take Care, 2013 Nothing Was the Same. Both of those albums we'll be talking about in a second. And then people kind of started pushing Drake into the corner, saying, oh, he's that soft boy, he only sings about his relationships, soft boy, whatever. We got the memes from him. And then he came back with If You're Reading This, It's Too Late, where he introduced himself as somebody again that can really rap and that can, you know, take some trap beats as well and completely destroy those. We start out with Legend, with Energy, you know, stuff like that, No Tellin', which just goes completely crazy. And it wasn't like the stuff we had heard before when Drake was maybe trying to put together an album with something for everybody. This was like to silence all the haters and doubters that said that he couldn't rap, and it worked really well. We have some amazing songs on here. I mean, looking at this track list right now, it's honestly a little bit nostalgic. Know Yourself was a track that I played so much. Six God as well. Star 67 was another song that I was playing religiously. And then also towards the later leg of the album, we had Company, You and the Six, one of his honestly most personal songs to his mother, and Jungle, which is by far one of the best Drake songs that perfectly fits that levitating cloudy type of sound that 40 is really known for. So I really think that this album could be in the discussion about being a classic, and I said to y'all that if y'all consider this a classic, then we might have to talk about For All the Dogs also kind of being in the conversation. Now, the only thing for me going against this being a classic album is that this was a mixtape. This was kind of just like, I'll give y'all this before Views, and Views was the big album. So he never intended this to be a project in itself and to be what we consider a classic album. So that's kind of the only thing that's going against it, but I can honestly agree with y'all that this is an amazing record and probably one of his best projects front to back. Next up on the list, we have Nothing Was the Same, and if we just go by track or by, you know, what we consider a very diverse album to be, I would say that Nothing Was the Same for me is even better than Take Care. I always said that this was my favorite Drake album, and I still stand by that, because when we just go through the tracks, we have different vibes, something for everybody, which is not always a good thing, but in this case, Drake really pulled that off. To me, it has more commercial appeal than Take Care, even though it was, I think, less successful. But we start out with an amazing intro, you know, that's not like, oh, I'm pop now, still very hip-hop with Tuscan Leather. We have bangers like Started From the Bottom, Wu-Tang Forever, Worst Behavior, 305 to My City, but then also the slower songs. You know, we got From Time, we got Maybe Too Much, then also the amazing outro with Pound Cake or Paris Morton Music 2 with Jay-Z that is still honestly the best beat ever in hip-hop. So this album to me is his best. Just when it comes to the songs on the record, the raw material, to me, Nothing Was the Same is Drake's best album. And I would argue that this honestly is more a classic than Take Care. But let's talk about Take Care next, and after that we'll kind of review the whole thing. Okay, so Take Care is obviously the album that we always talk about when talking about Drake's classic. Take Care 2011 was the time that Drake really found his own sound. That very mellow mix between singing and rapping, having 40 on that production that just sounds godly, divine. This was the sound that really, you know, was the main USP for Drake during this time. Coming off of, you know, his first debut album, Thank Me Later, which more sounded like he was playing it safe, trying to make more of a pop record. Take Care was his approach at creating his own sound, and you can tell that he definitely succeeded with this. I'm not saying we didn't have any bangers on here, headlines obviously, stuff like Make Me Proud, Underground Kings, but overall this album was very, very thematically consistent. You know, the sound was always very similar. You can tell if a song is from this album, maybe kind of like with Views. And I think that people are very rightfully so talking about this as Drake's classic album. As I said, Nothing Was the Same is for me personally. I would say personally that is his best album. But I think when it comes to what we label Drake as and what we talk about Drake influence in hip hop, Take Care was the sound that we always attribute to Drake and to this specific time period in his career. So I can fully agree that Take Care is probably Drake's classic album. And Nothing Was the Same is his best. There's a difference. There is a difference. But let me make that distinction. And after that is probably if you're reading this. Now, let's take a look at the poll again and see what y'all said, because funnily enough, 46%, almost half of y'all said Take Care. I was honestly thinking this would be even higher. 24% was said Nothing Was the Same. Shout out to all my fellow Nothing Was the Same lovers. 23% said If You're Reading This. So almost, you know, almost very similar, almost the same as Nothing Was the Same, and only 7% said Views. And I think that after breaking it down, after kind of looking at each album individually, we can say that honestly this poll was kind of representative, not just of people going off of their feelings, but also looking at things objectively. Let's see what For All the Dogs holds, if that can be in the conversation. I saw some people say Her Loss should also be in there. We gotta wait a couple of years to talk about that. Let me know what y'all expect For All the Dogs to do, and what album of those four that I went into today is actually your favorite. Let me know all your thoughts on this and your take on my thoughts in the comments down below. If you watched this video to the end and liked it, and you want to stay up to date with all current hip-hop events and releases, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, hit that like button, and go follow my social media, and most importantly, join my Discord in the description. Until the next one, you'll have an incredible day, and you'll take care.